Welcome to the next ritual iteration of the Temple of Grief. And today I am going to kind of bring it back to just good old-fashioned regular grief, just to remind us where we are when we live there and whatever memories we might have that are associated with that. Just to acknowledge those, recognize those, and recognize their similarities with what you might be experiencing in terms of our social and political environment. So, the idea here is to be able to turn grief into beauty. That's really kind of my whole purpose in life, and my whole purpose here for you in this temple is to help us help support our community for finding ways to turn whatever grief we are experiencing into beauty. And I also want to kind of make sure that folks know I tend to rely on humor quite a bit. So if I start cracking jokes, it's not that I'm trying to be irreverent, but in my family, the gallows humor tends to come in rather quickly. And I can remember when my brother passed in, I believe it was 2006. And I think my son was around 10 years old at the time. And my brother's funeral turned into this sort of almost like open mic of sharing memories and experiences about him and his life. And there was a lot of laughter. There were a lot of tears too, but there was a lot of laughter. And I think my son said to me afterwards something like, "Mom, I'm not really sure I understand this whole thing about laughing at funerals." So I want to just encourage you. If laughter comes in, don't judge it, don't hate it, don't say that it's wrong, don't be ashamed of it. If it comes, let it go, and then move on to whatever comes next. So I'd also like to just do a very brief invocation of our spirit guides, our ancestors, the four directions, the earth and sky, Star Nation, brothers and sisters, just to be present with us. We call upon this energy to establish a sacred container that is intact and it is protected from all intrusive energies, protected from the depths of our own shadow. May we see our shadow and embrace it and entertain it without falling deep into it. So I'm going to tell you a story, and I call this the chimichanga story. And I also want to kind of just contextualize this by saying the way that I kind of became a grief specialist was through my own grief. And even though, I have been through grief, the first time I really encountered it, I was 16 years old, and someone in my high school committed suicide. I didn't know what that was. I didn't really have words for it. A few years later, my cousin, who was only a year older than me, died of cancer when she was 19. And again, I didn't really know exactly what I was experiencing. I didn't really know how to put words on it. And then, like right in short order, in 2020, I had my own grief for my own crisis. My favorite cat died, who was, I swear he was my spirit guardian. My mother died in 2022, my other cat died in 2023, and my father just passed at the beginning of this year, 2024. And in all of those experiences, the journey and the iterations of that journey, they just get a little more gentle each time. They allow me to feel a little more supported each time. And they allow me to find a little more beauty each time. So even though it might seem like, wow, that's a lot of grief, that's a lot of loss, it is. And yet, every time I move through it, and I actually am experiencing something very similar on a different level this year. And maybe it's related to my father's death and maybe it's not, but there's a lot going on in my world. And I've been sort of in this cocoon right now. And yet there is still beauty in this. There is still humor. So I'm going to tell you this story, the chimichanga story. The first time my mother almost died, I was a wreck. I wasn't ready for it. I got the call on like a Tuesday morning, and it just so happened that because at that time I was the one living closest geographically to where my mother was staying in her assisted living facility, I just happened to be the first contact person. My sisters and I have sort of shared those duties depending on who lives where and where my mother was. So on this particular day, it was my job to receive the phone call that she was having chest pains and they were sending her to the hospital. And I was convinced she was dying. I mean, my mother has had health problems her whole life. She's been overweight and been fighting diabetes and heart conditions her whole life, right? And so I was convinced that this was the end. And so, I don't remember who I called or who I texted or whatever, but I just, sent someone in my institution, I'm going to the hospital to be with my mother. I don't know if I'm going to make it back in time to teach my classes. And of course, they were very understanding and accommodating. And I said, no, go, please be with your mother. We'll put a sign on the door. Your classes will be canceled. It's totally no big deal. Okay, great. So I go to the hospital thinking it's the end. And this would have been, it was actually right before we really had known what the word COVID was. This was early 2020. And I can remember sitting in the hospital with her. And, they always have the news on. There's always some station rambling on about whatever's going on in the world. And I can remember them talking about, some mysterious virus that was coming out of China. And I remember at the time just not really thinking much of it because I thought it was yet another of these, occasional scares that we get that end up being handled through public health measures, as they usually do, and we didn't realize this one was coming through in a bigger way. So there I was, sitting with her for several hours in the emergency room, and I think they had fed her, and hospital food is never that great or interesting or exciting. And I was getting hungry, and my mother, all of a sudden, she's like, I want a chimichanga. And I was like, are you kidding me, Mom? You just may have had a heart attack. You have high blood pressure and diabetes. I'm not going to go get you a chimichanga. And she just kept on and on and on. I want a chimichanga. I want a chimichanga. And I was like, okay, this is starting to get out of control. What is the deal with you and this chimichanga? And, the doctors came in and they did their tests and they said, all the precautions were taken and she was fine and they were going to send her back to the facility. And by this time, I think it was like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And she's like, I want a chimichanga. And then I suddenly just stopped and realized, and I looked at her and I said, are you creating this health crisis so that someone in the family will come save you and rescue you and take you for chimichangas? And I honestly can't remember if she just didn't say anything or if she admitted it, but it was very clear that she was like, oops, you caught me. And I said, okay. Suddenly realizing what codependent enabling behavior this all was, I was like, okay, I'm done. You know what? I've missed a day of work. You're fine. I'm going home now. The ambulance is going to take you back to your facility. See ya. And I was kind of mad about it a little bit. I was like, this is how I learned my adult behavior. Is this from a mother who engages in these sort of, I love you, Mom, but we have to tell these stories and laugh. And part of the reason I kind of teach that story through my creative grieving program is because when we learn how to tell our story, tell it the way we want to, reshape it in a way that gives us whatever is the satisfaction we need to know in an empowered way what we have endured, what we have learned from it, what we have gained from it. That's what this is all about. Learning how to re-narrate your story in a way that shares your empowerment and your resilience. And I know for some people, if you're really fresh in your grief, you just aren't even going to know how to get there. Which is why we're going to do an activity today, because the best thing you can do is allow some wiggling, Allow some looseness. Don't judge anything you're feeling. Don't shame yourself for anything you're feeling, whether it's rage or despair or whatever, or guilt or shame or blah, blah, blah. Don't judge yourself. Don't shame yourself. But don't stay there. Don't let yourself get stuck there. When you allow for that wiggleness, when you allow for that kind of looseness and that fluidity, you can feel the pain when it comes, you can feel the sense of loss when it comes, but it doesn't have to take over you like there's no way out. Okay? So what I'm going to share with you today is I'm going to give you just a very, very brief overview of my 5 steps in my creative grieving program, and know that you can do any one of them at any time. They do build on each other, but you can repeat them and you can do them consciously and on purpose. And that can help you move through the phases of grief, which sometimes we don't really have much control over when the emotions come. So, as you are thinking about your own chimichanga story, I'm going to tell you that the 5 steps to the creative grieving process are, the first one is to just create something. Create anything. And in this workshop, we are going to create something very small just to get you started. The second step is to release the person to their highest destiny. People forget, or they don't know, that the best way to heal a loved one who has passed on, who has become deceased, the best way to heal our relationship with them is to heal ourselves. And the best way to do that is to not cling to them and to not hang on to them. We have to let them go. It helps them heal their soul in whatever way they need to, and it helps us heal more quickly as well. The third step is to honor the memory. And I say honor the memory not necessarily of the person, because sometimes there was maybe a very problematic relationship, or sometimes it's not a person. And so I say honor the memory of the experience of having known that situation or that person. So, for example, in my family, we were sort of brought up with that sort of pick yourself up by your bootstraps kind of mentality, which I have a whole song about how that is a bit of a BS mentality, but I'm not going to go into that right now. But there was that kind of salt of the earth, Protestant work ethic, you got to work hard in life, you got to, and that, even though I have a kind of complicated relationship with that sort of like hard-working mentality, it also has given me resilience, which is actually step 5. Step 5 is receiving the gifts. And step 5, I know I skipped step 4, we're going to get back to step 4. Step 5, sometimes we don't know where to find the gifts. Sometimes we're not sure if they're our gifts. But the thing is, once we learn the lesson of whatever that life experience was there to teach us, there are always gifts underneath. So create something, release the person to their highest destiny, honor the memory, learn the lessons, and receive the gifts. So right now, I'm going to take you on a little journey. And I'm going to guide you through, what I want you to do first is I want you to grab something that you can be creative with. Maybe it's a journal and something to write with. Maybe it's a sketchbook, or I have a little watercolor pad. Maybe it's a watercolor pad. Maybe you want to have blocks or clay or something to sculpt or build something. Whatever feels like it's calling you to express yourself creatively. At some point you may need to write something, so it'd be good to have, a pen and paper of some sort on hand, because I will ask you to just write a few, to write a bunch maybe, and to choose a few phrases. So, how would I like to do this? You know what? I'm going to actually do this way, in honor of my mother and her chimichanga story. I'm just going to sing one of the lullabies that she used to sing for me. I'm just going to hum it, just to give you something to keep your ear going while you're drawing or painting or writing or sculpting. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tell you the three things. No, I'm not. I'm gonna tell you the first thing and I'm gonna sing a bit and then we're gonna pause and then I'm gonna tell you the second thing and then I'm gonna sing a bit and then we're gonna pause and then I'm gonna tell you the third thing and then I'm gonna sing a bit and then I'm gonna pause and then we're gonna condense the three things. Groovy? I hope it's groovy. So, take a deep breath. Another deep breath. Imagine the roots of your being, connecting you deep to the center of the earth. You're fully grounded. And the tendrils, the tentacles, the branches of your being are reaching far up into the heavens, and you are connected to the entire universe. The first thing I would like you to write or draw or paint or sculpt is something you really love about the person or situation you're grieving. What do you really love the most about the person or situation you are grieving? Ooh. If you need to, you can pause the video if you feel like you want to keep drawing or writing or sculpting. And when you're ready to move on to the next part, you're going to write or draw or paint or sculpt everything that you hate about this situation. Everything that makes you angry, that enrages you about this situation. And go ahead and purge that all. Ooh. And again, if you need to, you can pause the video, take as long as you need to purge all that rage and anger from your system, get it out of your system, send it on the express lane out to the universe. And when you are ready for the final phase, I want you to write or draw or paint or sculpt the thing that you most want to remember about this person or this situation. What is the one thing that you most want to remember about this person or this situation? And now, when you're ready, if you need to pause, you can, if you want to finish that. The way you're going to condense everything you have just jotted down or written or sculpted. It'll be a little trickier if you painted it or sculpted it, because you'll have to use a few words. But I want you to write a haiku. So what I want you to do is I want you to go through all the sentences that you've just written and choose 2 of them that are 5 syllables long and 1 of them that is 7 syllables long. Because the form of a haiku is a 5-syllable line, a 7-syllable line, and a 5-syllable line. Now, if you were painting or sculpting, just take a moment, listen to your heart, and sense what wants to come through. 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. Let me see if I can do one just off the cuff. How do I love thee? You are no longer here now. Your memory stays. So, write your own haiku, and I encourage you to share it as a way of honoring the memory of the person or situation that you're grieving. Something beautiful that you get to share because you have turned your grief into beauty. Have a good one.